Hello, and welcome to LURK, the Insomnia Files. If you're awake right now, staring into the dark while the rest of the world sleeps, you're in the right place. Many people listen to these stories to relax. Others listen because sleep refuses to come. Before we begin, leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from tonight. A bedroom, a car, a quiet house that doesn't feel as empty as it should. If these stories speak to you, make sure you like the video and subscribe. To LURK, the Insomnia Files. Now get comfortable, lower the lights, take a slow breath, and let's open tonight's file. I got a package in the mail from my dad that I wasn't expecting. It was wrapped in thick brown paper, wide and flat, heavier than it looked, with the word fragile written across the top in thick black marker. The handwriting was his, all sharp angles and heavy pressure. I remember standing in the hallway for a moment just staring at it, trying to guess what it could be, before carrying it inside and setting it carefully on the table. When I unwrapped it, I found a large acrylic painting in an ornate frame. The frame looked like plaster molded to imitate bronze, with a dull metallic sheen and small decorative flourishes around the edges. It had some weight to it, the kind that made you handle it carefully even before you read the warning on the package. The painting itself showed a long hallway lined with doors, the sort of corridor you might see in an expensive old hotel. The perspective pulled your eyes straight down the center. The walls were divided horizontally, the upper half painted an off-white color, and the lower half a deep crimson that faded smoothly into the red carpet covering the floor. Between each door was a small upturned wall light, casting a soft yellow glow, and at the far end of the hall there was another wall where the corridor seemed to turn, disappearing around a corner into a perpendicular hallway you couldn't quite see. What struck me immediately was the detail. It wasn't photorealistic, but every part of it felt deliberate. The trim on the walls, the reflections on the doorknobs, the subtle shading in the carpet. It gave the impression that somewhere out there, this hallway existed exactly as shown. But then if you stood in the right place and held the painting up, you could almost line it up with reality. The only thing that marked it as art was the stylized brushwork and the frame itself. I called my dad right away to thank him. "It's amazing," I told him. "Where did you even find this?" "At an auction," he said casually, like that explained everything. It did, more or less. My dad had always loved auctions. He liked the idea of stumbling onto something unusual, something with a story attached. I hung the painting in my home office just behind my desk. I realized afterward that it wasn't the best placement, because to really look at it I had to swivel my chair all the way around. Still, once it was on the wall, I didn't feel like taking it down again. It felt settled there, like it belonged. When I worked, I could almost feel it at my back, and every now and then I'd turn around and stare at it, letting my eyes drift down the hallway, imagining what it would feel like to step through the frame and walk down that red carpet. If nothing strange had happened, this would just be a story about a nice painting. A week or so later, we had friends over for dinner. Mark and Sabina came by, and at some point Mark and I drifted into my office while our wives got absorbed in a long conversation about knitting, which had recently become my wife's latest obsession. I sat down at my desk to pull up a video I'd been telling Mark about, and while it loaded, he wandered closer to the painting. "Where'd you get this?" he asked. "My dad bought it at an auction and gave it to me." He leaned in, squinting. "It's creepy." "It's not creepy," I said automatically. though I wasn't entirely sure what word I'd use instead. He tilted his head. It kind of is. Hypnotic, maybe. I turned around to look at it with him. He stepped closer and ran his fingers lightly over the surface, tracing the raised texture of the acrylic paint. I let my eyes move slowly over the familiar details. Then Mark frowned. Huh, I didn't notice that before. What? I asked. At the end of the hall, he said, pointing. There's light coming from around the corner, and look, it's casting a shadow on the floor. I moved closer. I had honestly never paid much attention to the very end of the corridor. Now that he pointed it out, I could see it clearly. A yellowish glow spilled from around the corner, and on the carpet there was a shadow shaped vaguely like a person standing just out of sight. I reached out and touched the paint, yet half expecting it to be some trick of the room's lighting. But no, I could feel the texture where the shadow was painted. See? Mark said. That's unsettling. It was. And what bothered me more was the nagging thought that followed. Why hadn't I noticed it before? Had it always been there? A couple of days later, I was working late in my office, around 9:30 at night. I was tired and unfocused, so I leaned back in my chair and turned around to look at the painting, the way I often did when I needed a break. The moment my eyes settled on it, I felt a sudden wave of vertigo, like the floor had vanished beneath me. I grabbed the arms of my chair to steady myself, heart pounding. Something was wrong. You wouldn't notice it unless you knew the painting very well. I did. The hallway had originally had 6 doors. I remembered counting them the first day I hung it up. 3 on the left, 3 on the right, evenly spaced, each with a small, shiny metal knob. Now there were 7. 3 doors on the left, 4 on the right. Everything else looked the same. The proportions were unchanged. The hallway didn't look longer, but there was an extra door on the right-hand side, blending in so perfectly that I couldn't even say which one was new. I just knew there were 4 now instead of 3. I turned away, rubbed my eyes, then looked again. 7 doors. I stood up and paced, then sat back down and checked again. Still 7. My first instinct was to call my dad. "Is this some kind of trick painting?" I asked him. "What do you mean?" "I mean it keeps changing. I can see it changing." There was a pause. "Not that I know of," he said. "It was just one of a bunch at the auction." After we hung up, I took the painting down and inspected the back, looking for anything mechanical or digital. There was nothing, just canvas and frame. Feeling unsettled, I leaned it against the wall behind my desk, with the painted side facing inward so I wouldn't have to look at it. The next day, I pulled my wife into the office so she could finally see it properly. "How many doors do you see?" I asked. She studied it for a moment. 7. When I first got it, there were 6. She laughed and gave me a look like I was joking. "Okay, which one wasn't there before?" "I don't know." That just made her laugh harder. She kissed me and went back to the living room. It didn't stop there. When I next talked to Mark, I told him about the extra door. "Dad, are you sure there weren't 7 to begin with?" he asked. "I swear there were 6. "Well," he said, "if it changes again, you should take a photo. That way, you'll have proof." It seemed obvious in hindsight. I took a photo of the painting with my phone. 2 days passed. Nothing changed. On the 3rd day, I walked into my office and froze. There was a figure at the end of the hallway in the painting. I don't know what it was. It wasn't clearly a man or a woman. It wasn't clearly human. It looked like someone had rushed through painting it, because it lacked the careful detail of the rest of the scene. The shape was hunched and uneven, with long arms and bowed legs, like a blurred, distorted person awkwardly inserted into an otherwise perfect composition. I touched the canvas again, half expecting the paint to be wet. It wasn't. But what scared me most was the face, or what I could see of it. There weren't clear features, just warped shadows suggesting eyes and a mouth, enough to let my imagination fill in the rest. I wished there was less detail, even as I was horrified by what little there was. But I had proof now. I opened the photo I'd taken to show my wife. The figure was in the photo, too. I didn't question my sanity. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. I carried the painting out of the house and set it on the curb with our trash. I didn't want it near my family. The next evening, it was gone. I assumed someone had taken it. I told myself that was fine. Let it be someone else's problem. That night, Mark asked if the painting had changed again. I told him about the figure and how I'd gotten rid of it. "I wish I'd seen it," he said. "I can send you the photo," I replied. When I opened the file, my blood ran cold. The figure had raised its arms, both of them lifted high, fingers spread wide, like it was waving. The shading on its face now looked like a stretched grin. I tried to send the file, but it kept corrupting. I uploaded it to my cloud storage instead and shared it. "The file's corrupted," Mark texted. I checked. He was right. I deleted the file, trying to calm myself. 2 days later, while restoring some accidentally deleted documents, I saw the image file sitting in the recycle bin. I opened it. The hallway looked wrong. The walls sagged, the lights peeled, the carpet darkened. The figure was closer now, mid-step, arms touching both walls. One of the doors was open, blue light spilling out, and on the floor lay a small yellow stuffed lion. And that was when my wife called me to say goodnight to our daughter. In her room, I saw the same toy lying just inside her open closet. I grabbed it, shut the door, blocked it with furniture, and ran back to my office. The image had changed again. The door was closed. The toy was gone. The thing stood right outside the door, hands pressed against it, head turned toward me, grinning. "I've tried to find the painting. I need to destroy it, because now I know the truth. All doors lead to the hallway." The voice from my sister's phone calmly said that in 2 miles, we needed to take exit 19 for Valley Park Drive South. I didn't even look at the phone before answering. "Charlotte, turn that thing off. I know exactly where I'm going." She laughed and looked out the window, clearly enjoying herself. She said it had been a couple of decades, and asked if I was really sure I remembered the way. I told her there was no chance I could forget where Adventure Valley was. We had spent almost every summer of our childhood there. Before I could finish my sentence, she suddenly shouted and pointed straight ahead, her arm cutting across my face. I swerved slightly before correcting the wheel, my heart jumping into my throat. There it is. Adventure Valley. Oh my God, what ride is that? That coaster. It was called Steel something, right? Or is that Mayhem Mountain? I pushed her arm back toward her seat and tried not to laugh. I couldn't blame her excitement. I felt it too, deep in my chest, even though I was trying hard to act calm. Seeing the metal rails and old wooden structures rising above the trees made me feel like a kid again, bouncing in the back seat of our parents' car, screaming with excitement as the park came into view. "That's the Steel Viper," I told her. "Mayhem Mountain is on the other side, and that wooden one is the Excalibur." Her face lit up with recognition. She said she remembered them, admitted she had always been too scared to ride the Viper, but she rode the Excalibur over and over. I teased her and told her she was an adult now, and it was time to finally face the Viper. She said she would, as long as the contractors had tested it and approved it. That was the real concern. We didn't know yet which rides had passed inspection and which hadn't. I silently hoped Mayhem Mountain was cleared. I had left Brandon several voicemails about it, but he had been swamped ever since we bought the park. I couldn't really blame him. If someone had told 12-year-old me that Brandon Decker would one day graduate near the top of his class from a prestigious business school, I would have laughed until I cried. Brandon had been wild, loud, reckless. Tyler maybe, but Brandon, never. Looking back, I think Adventure Valley had more influence on him than anything else. When the park shut down in 1989, Brandon gathered all of us in his basement and made us swear a promise. It was the most serious I had ever seen him. We were 12 years old, full of sugar and summer air, and we swore that one day we would buy Adventure Valley and make it ours. At the time, it felt like the most important promise in the world. We talked about riding the coasters whenever we wanted and banning kids we didn't like. It was childish, but it was ours. It took 20 years, but somehow we did it. Brandon pushed harder than anyone. Tyler put up serious collateral. The bank approved a massive loan, and suddenly we owned a broken, forgotten amusement park. The size of that loan haunted my dreams for weeks. The park had been losing money for years before it closed. On top of that, the area had been plagued by runaways and missing kids in the late 80s. Fear had driven people away. But none of that mattered when I saw the tracks rise over the trees again. This was Adventure Valley. If we opened the gates, people would come. Charlotte squealed again and told me that was our exit. I took it, passed under the bridge, and within minutes, we were pulling into the cracked parking lot. A few cars were already there. It looked like we were the last ones to arrive. She spotted the others immediately. She commented on Tyler's weight loss, Brandon's thinning hair, and then nearly shouted when she recognized Koji. I told her to calm down and reminded her they were my friends, not her dating pool. She just grinned and asked which half of them were married. When we got out of the car, she asked who the girl standing next to Scott was. I hesitated before admitting it was Danny, Scott's girlfriend. When Charlotte realized it was the same Danny from high school, her expression flashed with shock before turning into a playful smile. But she said it was fine, and rushed ahead before I could worry more about it. Standing together at the old ticket booths made something warm settle in my chest. Tyler greeted me loudly, his confident voice exactly the same as always. Brandon joked about ticket prices. Koji questioned whether people would really pay that much. Scott, as usual, looked stoned out of his mind. We walked into the park, through rusted turnstiles, and it felt unreal knowing we owned everything inside those gates. Brandon began explaining his plans, pointing out what would need rebuilding. Excalibur would take the most work. Scott asked if we had the money. Tyler assured him we did. Charlotte, already impatient, asked if we could ride something. Brandon laughed and said that was the point. I told them I was there for Mayhem Mountain. That got a few groans. Charlotte said she hated that ride. Koji said it was boring. I defended it like my life depended on it. We started at one end of the park and worked our way through, riding the old attractions, flipping switches ourselves, laughing and arguing. It didn't take long to forget we were adults. I kept glancing toward the back of the park, toward Mayhem Mountain. That ride had always been Brandon's and mine. At the Enterprise ride, I stayed behind to run controls while the others rode. While the cars spun, I noticed graffiti sprayed across the sign. Words asking where the missing kids had gone. Messages about death and runaways. It made my stomach tighten. I asked Brandon if he thought that history would hurt attendance. He told me low attendance wasn't why the park closed. The financial records showed money bleeding into something called county services. No one could explain it. The owner had sold the park cheaply and left. The owner's name was Abel Bisset, son of a French billionaire. Brandon said people called him simple. That surprised me. It was strange to think someone like that had built this place. As the sun began to set, we finally reached Mayhem Mountain. I felt a rush of excitement and fear. We didn't have to leave this time. The park wasn't closing. We argued briefly about eating first, then decided to ride. The green car waited on the track, just like old times. Brandon and I claimed the front seat. Charlotte refused to ride, choosing to run the controls instead. The ride began exactly as I remembered. The climb, the drop, the scream in my throat. We rode it 3 times before getting off. As Koji examined the control panel and noticed something strange. A switch labeled Track B. None of us remembered a Track B. Charlotte immediately said no. Koji insisted it had to be safe. Brandon shrugged and said the contractors had cleared the ride. One by one, we agreed to try it. Charlotte stayed behind, shaking her head. The rest of us climbed in. The switch was flipped. Somewhere, metal scraped loudly. The track looked the same. The ride started normally. The first hill, the first loop. Everything felt fine until suddenly the inline roll was above us, not ahead. The track dropped into a dark hole. We plunged into total darkness. The restraints released. I held on and screamed. Lights flashed on in a massive underground chamber filled with twisted track. In the distance, I saw a hill that ended in nothing. Fear swallowed us. Funny people screamed. Someone fell. Then another. The ride slowed, sped, twisted. We were being tested, toyed with. At the end, the car stopped before 4 tracks. A panel appeared with colored buttons. We had to choose how to die. I chose orange. The restraints released again. A loop approached. I let go. I woke on the ground, broken but alive. Above me, the cars rushed past. The pain came in waves. Eventually, silence followed. I crawled to the hole and looked down. The track ended just beneath the surface. Far below, metal echoed. Later, I saw the window. I understood. I survived. The others didn't. Adventure Valley disappeared. Apartments were built. They remain empty. I still can't walk right. I still can't stand the dark. And I know without a doubt that somewhere out there, in some park, on some ride, there is another Track B waiting. If you live in Menifee, California, and someone knocks on your door tonight, do not open it. Do not try to be polite. Do not assume it is harmless. More than anything else, do not leave anyone in your house alone, not even for a moment. Stay together. Lock your doors. Call the police, and wait. I am writing this while sitting in a cold room at the police station, answering the same questions over and over again, because I don't want what happened to me last night to happen to anyone else tonight. I live alone in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind people imagine when they think about safety and comfort. The streets are clean, the houses all look friendly, and in the evenings you see kids riding bikes, while parents stand outside talking and watering their lawns. That was exactly how last night started. My girlfriend and I pulled into the driveway just after sunset. We waved at a couple of kids playing in the street and chatted briefly with Mrs. Roop from next door, who was trimming her hedges. Everything felt calm and normal. I remember thinking how lucky I was. I was only 20 years old, and somehow I already had the life I always imagined. We went inside and locked the door behind us without even thinking about it. The evening was easy and familiar. We cooked dinner together, moving around each other in the kitchen without ever bumping into one another, like we had done it 1,000 times before. There was something comfortable about it, something that made the world feel steady. We ate, cleaned up, and then settled downstairs on the couch to watch television. Nothing special, just reruns and half paying attention, to laughing at dumb jokes. It was one of those nights that feels so ordinary you don't bother remembering the details because you assume there will be thousands more just like it. Eventually, we went upstairs. She went into the bathroom to do the nightly routine that always took longer than I expected, and I climbed into bed with a book I had read many times before. The fan was on, humming softly, and the sound of running water came from the bathroom. Between those two noises, I almost didn't hear anything else. I wish I hadn't heard it at all. I wish the fan had been just a little louder. If it had been, everything might be different now. There were 3 knocks at the door. At first I thought I imagined it. I lay there for a second, staring at the ceiling, listening. Then it happened again, slow and deliberate. I reached over and turned the fan off, my stomach tightening. 3 more knocks. I muttered under my breath, annoyed more than afraid, and put my book down. I grabbed a jacket from the chair and stepped into it as I left the bedroom. I could hear my girlfriend start to say something from the bathroom, but I told her I'd be right back. I walked down the stairs, already irritated, thinking it was probably another person trying to sell something. As I flicked on the light by the front door, I leaned forward to look through the peephole. It was completely dark. I frowned and turned on the porch light. Still nothing but darkness. I assumed the bulb had gone out again. It had happened before. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. No one was there. The porch was empty. The driveway was empty. The street was quiet, lit only by streetlights and the soft hum they made. I stepped onto the welcome mat and looked around, feeling foolish. I told myself it had to be kids messing around, ringing doors and running off. I shook my head, went back inside, and locked the door behind me. That should have been the end of it. But as I turned toward the stairs, a strange feeling settled in my stomach. It wasn't fear exactly, more like unease, like something was out of place. I tried to ignore it. I decided food would help. Food always helped. I walked down the hallway into the kitchen and turned on the light. I opened the fridge and scanned the shelves, looking for something quick. I grabbed one of those cheap peanut butter and chocolate wafer bars I kept cold so it wouldn't melt. As I peeled back the wrapper and took a bite, something caught my attention. The window above the sink was open. I froze, staring at it. I had never opened that window, not once since moving in. I tried to remember if there was any reason it would be open, and then it clicked. Earlier she had complained about being hot while doing the dishes. She must have opened it to cool off. That explanation should have been enough. It wasn't. I walked over and slid the window shut, locked it, and stood there for a second longer than necessary, listening. Nothing. I went back upstairs. The bathroom water was still running. I stepped into the bedroom and walked toward the bathroom door, about to ask if she had called out to me earlier. The words died in my throat. The bathroom was empty. Steam filled the room, clinging to the mirror. Water poured from the faucet into the sink. I turned it off and stood there, confused. And my heart is starting to beat faster. I looked around the bedroom. She wasn't there. I called her name. No answer. I checked the walk-in closet. Nothing. I stepped back into the hallway, my mind racing. That was when I noticed something on my nightstand. A piece of paper sat on top of my book, folded neatly in half, standing upright like a little tent. I walked over and picked it up. Before I even read it, I saw the blood. A single bloody fingerprint stained one corner of the paper. My hands began to shake. I unfolded the paper and read the message. She's in the house. Find her. I read it again and again, hoping the words would change, hoping I was misunderstanding. I looked around the room expecting her to jump out laughing, telling me it was a prank. The room stayed silent. I searched everywhere, behind chairs, inside the shower, in the closet. Finally, I dropped to my knees and looked under the bed, my palms slipping slightly on the hardwood floor. There was nothing there. I stood up, my chest tight, and shouted her name again, my voice cracking. I ran through the upstairs rooms, then downstairs, opening doors, checking corners. It was like she had vanished. The note was the only proof she had been there at all. I knew I needed to call the police. I ran back upstairs to grab my phone. It wasn't on the dresser. My keys and wallet were gone, too. I checked my jeans. Empty. Panic started to claw at my chest. Then I heard it. Drip, drip, drip. I stormed into the bathroom, angry and desperate, and grabbed the faucet, twisting it hard. The sound didn't stop. There was no water in the sink. The dripping sounded farther away. I stepped slowly back into the bedroom. The sound grew louder as I moved closer to the bed. My heart hammered in my ears as I dropped to my knees again and lifted the bed skirt. A small pool of blood spread across the floor beneath the bed. I screamed and ripped the sheets off, shoving my hands between the mattress and the box spring. With a sob, I heaved the mattress up. My mind refused to understand what I was seeing. There was a large tear in the box spring. Inside it, her face stared out, her eyes open, her neck soaked in red. My legs gave out. I pulled her out and held her, screaming her name, begging her to wake up. A second note slid onto the box spring. I picked it up with trembling fingers and forced myself to read it. But where am I? That is the last thing I remember clearly before I ran from the house, screaming for help. Just for a moment. If this is your first time here, I invite you to subscribe to LURK, the Insomnia Files. This channel is dedicated to real accounts, disturbing encounters, and unexplained moments shared by people who never expected anything to go wrong until it did. New files are released regularly, usually when most people are asleep. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next case when the night feels a little too quiet. Now, back to the story. I never thought I would be the kind of person who tells people to avoid a place, a time, or a simple everyday action like ordering food. But some nights change you. Some nights leave a mark so deep that you can't pretend it was nothing. This is one of those nights, and I'm telling it exactly as it happened, as clearly as I can, because I still don't fully understand it myself. That night started like so many others. I was the designated driver, which already put me in a bad mood. Nobody likes being the DD, especially when you're surrounded by drunk friends who think volume equals humor. We had been out for hours, and by the time we piled into my car, it was well past midnight. Everyone was loud, sloppy, and starving. I knew what was coming before anyone even said it. Jack in the box. The moment the words left someone's mouth, the car erupted. People were yelling over each other, throwing out random food items like it was some kind of contest. Chili cheese fries, milkshakes, tacos, more chili cheese fries. I snapped at them, swearing and telling them I already had the order written down, that they needed to shut up so I could actually place it. They laughed, of course. Drunk people always laugh when you're angry. I pulled into the Jack in the Box parking lot around 2 in the morning. It was strangely quiet for a Friday night. No cars in the drive-thru, no groups of teenagers hanging around, Not even anyone loitering near the convenience stores nearby. The lights were on, though, bright and clean, and cars were passing by on the main road just beyond the bushes. It all looked normal enough. When I rolled down my window, I heard a woman's voice mid-sentence. Or, in the box. How may I help you? Hi, welcome to Jack in the Box. How may I help you? At the time, it barely registered. I assumed she was tired or distracted, maybe repeating herself because she hadn't seen my car pull up yet. Night shifts are rough. I get that. I started to speak. Yeah, can I get a... Hi, welcome to Jack. That interruption made me pause. It wasn't rude, exactly, but it was strange. I cut her off, irritated. Yes, hi. There was a short burst of static, then a quiet response. Oh, hi. Her voice sounded small, weak, almost scared. It made the hairs on my arms stand up, though I didn't know why. I placed the order anyway, rattling it off quickly, listing greasy food for a car full of drunk college students. When I finished, there was a short silence. Is that all? Her voice was still thin and shaky, like she was short of breath. I hesitated, suddenly aware of how empty the lot felt. Yeah, I said. Come to the first window. Her tone changed completely. Strong, clear, professional. It was like a switch had been flipped. The sudden difference unsettled me more than the earlier weirdness. I pulled forward, trying to ignore the feeling crawling up my spine. Inside the car, someone cranked the music louder, and I focused on that noise instead. At the first window, I was met with a smiling blonde woman. She looked normal, friendly even. She smiled through the closed window, then slid it open quickly. 2345 Hun. Same confident voice. I handed her my card, and she turned away to run it. I turned back toward my friends, yelling at one to check if another was still breathing, telling someone else to stop singing. For a moment, I forgot about the window entirely. Then I realized she hadn't turned back around. Ma'am? I said. When she faced me again, everything was wrong. Her skin looked pale, almost gray. She was shaking so badly I could see it in her shoulders. Her teeth were chattering softly, though it wasn't cold. She was scratching behind her right ear with frantic movements, like she couldn't stop herself. Her eyes were wide, far too wide, filled with something like panic. Despite all that, her arm was steady as she handed me my card and receipt. She leaned in closer than necessary, closer than any cashier ever had. When she smiled, my stomach dropped. It wasn't a real smile. It looked forced, like her mouth was being pulled into shape without her involvement. In a quiet, frightened voice, she said, "Drive through to the second window. Oh, please." I couldn't stop myself. "Are you okay?" She leaned back without answering, closed the window, and kept staring at me through the glass. Her shaking stopped. The smile stayed. I pulled forward to the second window. It was closed. I waited, scrolling on my phone, trying to calm myself. Jack in the Box usually moved fast, even late at night. Minutes passed. Too many minutes. My friends grew restless. One of them got out and knocked on the window, shouting for food. I jumped out and dragged him back, embarrassed and uneasy. When the window finally opened, it was the same woman. That alone made my chest tighten. It was never the same person at both windows. Either they rotated or only used one window at night. This felt wrong. She handed me 2 bags of food. She wasn't shaking anymore. Her face was blank, her eyes unfocused. Felt like she was staring through me instead of at me. "Are you okay?" I asked again. That's when I noticed the silence. No clanging, no voices, no kitchen noise at all. Just my engine idling. Her eyes snapped to mine, suddenly alert. Her upper lip trembled. In my rearview mirror, headlights appeared as another car pulled into the drive-thru. Her gaze flicked to them, then back to me. She scratched behind her ear again, and this time I saw it clearly. Her thumbnail was gone. The nail bed underneath was black and rotting, like dead flesh. She dropped her hand and smiled that same empty smile. "Thank you for visiting Jack in the Box." She slammed the window shut. We drove home. My friends devoured the food in the car, laughing, moaning, covered in grease. I didn't eat a single bite. I didn't say a word. When we got back, they stumbled inside, I still eating. Someone dropped a bag in the hallway. I went straight to bed. The next morning, I found the bag on the floor. I picked it up to throw it away. The receipt slipped out, along with ketchup packets. I glanced at it, and my heart stopped. On the back, written in shaky handwriting, were 3 words. "Don't eat it." I threw everything away. I don't go to that Jack in the Box anymore. I don't drive through late at night. And every time I hear a fast food speaker crackle to life, I think of her eyes, her smile, and that warning I almost ignored. The doctor said it was all in my head. He used words like hallucination and phantom sensation, like the pain of a limb that is no longer there. He spoke calmly, like this was all very normal. He tapped his pen, frowned slightly, and wrote another prescription. I have taken so many pills that I've lost count. Yellow ones, red and white capsules, green ones that made my stomach burn. They gave me nausea. They made my hair fall out. They made it hard to control my body. But none of them took my daughter away from me. None of them stopped her voice. The doctor told me to talk about it, to tell people what happened. I almost laughed at that. Who was I supposed to tell? Friends disappeared from my life after Belle vanished. They didn't say it out loud, but I could see it in their eyes. Suspicion, fear, pity. It's late now. The house is quiet again. It's just me and the darkness and the memory of everything that went wrong. I don't know why I'm writing this, except that I need someone to know, someone to hear it. We thought we had finally made it when we moved to the suburbs. Sylvia and I both had good jobs. Somehow we survived the layoffs that crushed so many people around 2010. For the first time, money wasn't a constant worry. 8 years before the move, we had our daughter, Annabelle. We called her Belle. Parents understand this kind of love. A child changes everything. Your entire world starts to spin around them. The move felt right. It felt safe. Quiet streets, lawns, families. No city noise, no danger. No stories about missing children on the evening news. The house wasn't perfect, but it was close enough. A yard for Belle to play in. A fireplace for winter. Enough rooms for us to grow into. It came furnished, which felt strange but convenient. The price was almost too good. Our agent called it a distressed sale. I didn't ask many questions. I wish I had. The first night is when everything began. Sylvia fell asleep quickly, her breathing slow and steady beside me. Moonlight spilled through the window, lighting the fine hairs on her shoulder. We had celebrated with drinks after dinner. I lay there, warm and heavy, drifting. That's when I heard it. At first I thought it was rats, scratching inside the walls, tiny feet tapping against wood. Sylvia didn't move. I slid out of bed, my feet touching the cold floor. The boards creaked as I crossed the room. The scratching stopped, then started again somewhere else. I pressed my ear to the wall. Nothing. Then, very faint. Barely there, I heard laughter. A child's laughter, inside the wall. I didn't tell anyone. I convinced myself it was nothing. Pipes, wind, old house noises. I told myself anything that would let me sleep. But Belle changed. Slowly. She grew quieter, tired. Dark circles formed under her eyes. Sylvia didn't notice. She never did. I asked Belle if she was sleeping okay. One night, while we were doing dishes, she looked up at me and said the other children wanted to come in and play, but they couldn't open the door. I laughed it off, but my skin prickled. She showed me the door behind her wardrobe. A painted door, perfectly painted. I touched it. It felt like a wall. She said the children behind it told her about it. That night I heard footsteps again. Many of them. Running. Laughing. When I opened Belle's door, though she was standing there in the dark, whispering the same sentence over and over. All the doors are open now. She didn't remember it in the morning. I found paint dust on the floor. Pink paint. From the wall. The noises continued. Always at night. Never when Sylvia was awake. Belle grew thinner. Quieter. Her teacher emailed me. Said Belle was tired in class. Said she stayed up playing games at night. I knew that wasn't true. I spread flour on the floor one night. I wanted proof. In the morning I saw footprints. Small ones. Standing next to my bed. Watching me sleep. Then I realized they weren't Belle's. Her shoe didn't match the prints. That was when the house stopped hiding. I heard voices during the day. Doors appeared in places they shouldn't exist. Outlined in mildew between bathroom tiles. Scratched into the floor beneath a rug. Or cold to the touch. Cold like winter air, laking through. One morning, Belle vanished from the bathroom while the shower was running. I found her in her room, wet hair dripping, staring at the painted door. She watched me leave. That night, she sleepwalked again. I followed her. I found a door scratched into the basement wall. Then another. Huge double doors, painted bright, childish colors. The dust on the floor showed they had opened. I grabbed Belle and tried to leave. I tried to wake Sylvia. I tried to explain. She didn't believe me. She thought I was breaking. She said we would talk in the morning. Belle returned to the room then, eyes burning, voice flat. She said all the doors were closing, and she had to stay. Sylvia tried to pull her away. Belle didn't move. The house filled with footsteps. The walls bulged. A door pushed out from beneath the wallpaper. Fingers pressed through. Dozens of them, tearing, reaching. Belle looked at me one last time. She told me not to look. She said she loved us. Then she turned off the light. The room went cold, bigger, empty. When the noise stopped, she was gone. The police came. Doctors came. Walls were torn open. Nothing was found. Sylvia and I didn't survive it. Love doesn't always die loudly. Sometimes it just fades. I came back to the house alone. The laughter is still here. Belle is still here. She sounds happy, and I don't think she wants to come home. About 5 years ago, I was living downtown in a large city in the United States. I had always been a night person. Sleeping early never came naturally to me, and my mind felt more alive when the world around me was quiet. My roommate was the exact opposite. He would be asleep before midnight almost every night, leaving me alone with my thoughts for hours. To pass the time, I developed a habit of going on long walks. I would put on comfortable shoes, leave my phone in my pocket, and just walk through the city, thinking about life, work, and whatever else drifted through my mind. I did this for almost 4 years, night after night, sometimes for hours at a time. I walked through busy streets, quiet neighborhoods, past bars, parks, and closed storefronts. I never once felt afraid. Not even a little. I used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in the city were polite. People would nod at me, say hello, or ignore me completely. The city felt safe, even late at night. It felt familiar. It felt like home. That feeling disappeared in a matter of minutes on one single night. It was a Wednesday night, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning. I remember that clearly because Wednesdays were usually especially quiet. Most people were home, asleep, preparing for work the next day. I was walking near a park that was regularly patrolled by police. It wasn't close to my apartment, but I often walked that far just to clear my head. That night, the park was completely empty, just like it usually was at that hour. No couples on benches, no joggers, no homeless people sleeping on the grass. Just empty paths and still trees. But the streets around the park were quiet, too. A few cars passed now and then, but traffic was light. The air felt calm, normal. At some point, I turned onto a short side street that I often used to loop back toward my apartment. It was narrow, with parked cars lining both sides, and only a few street lights spaced far apart. As soon as I stepped onto that street, something felt different, though I couldn't say why at first. Then I noticed him, at the far end of the street, on my side of the sidewalk. I saw the silhouette of a man. He wasn't standing still. He was moving in a strange way. At first I thought he was dancing. It looked almost like a waltz, slow and deliberate. But there was something off about it. After every small pattern of steps, he would take an odd stride forward, like he was advancing between dances. The best way I can describe it is that he was dance-walking, slowly making his way straight toward me. My first thought was that he was drunk. That made sense. It was late. People did weird things when they were drunk. I didn't want to get involved, so I did what I always did when I passed someone late at night. I stepped as close to the edge of the sidewalk as I could, closer to the road, to give him plenty of space to pass. As he got closer, I started noticing details that made my stomach tighten. His movements weren't sloppy. They were smooth, almost elegant. His body was tall and thin, his limbs long. He was wearing what looked like an old suit, the kind you don't really see people wear casually anymore. It hung loosely on him, like it didn't quite fit. He danced closer and closer. Then I saw his face. His eyes were wide open, far wider than they should have been, and his head was tilted slightly back, as if he were staring up at the sky, rather than at where he was going. His mouth was stretched into a smile so wide, it looked painful, like a cartoon character whose face had been pulled too far. It didn't look like a happy smile. It didn't look friendly. It looked forced, unnatural, frozen in place. That was the moment I decided I didn't want him anywhere near me. I turned and crossed the street. There were no cars coming, and the road was empty. As I reached the other side, I glanced back, mostly out of reflex. I stopped instantly. He had stopped dancing. He was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly lined up with where I was standing on the opposite sidewalk. His body was facing me, but his head was still tilted back, eyes still fixed on the sky. That horrible smile was still stretched across his face. A wave of fear washed over me, the kind that makes your chest feel tight and your legs feel weak. I started walking again, slowly at first, never taking my eyes off him. He didn't move. He just stood there, like a statue. I walked farther, putting distance between us. When I was about half a block away, I finally forced myself to look forward so I wouldn't trip over anything. The street ahead of me was empty, completely empty. I looked back again. He was gone. For a split second, I felt relief, real, physical relief. I told myself I'd overreacted. Then I saw him again. He had crossed the street. He was closer now, much closer than he should have been. He was crouched slightly, his body lowered, like an animal ready to spring. I couldn't see his face clearly in the shadows. But I knew he was facing me. I knew it. I had only looked away for maybe 10 seconds. There was no way he should have been able to move that fast. I stood there, frozen, staring at him, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Then he started moving again. This time, he didn't dance. He took huge, exaggerated steps on the tips of his toes, lifting his knees high, placing each foot down carefully, like a cartoon character sneaking up on someone. Except this wasn't slow or silly. He was moving fast, very fast, too fast. I wish I could say I ran. I wish I could say I reached for my phone or my pepper spray, or did anything smart at all. I didn't. I couldn't. My body refused to move. Fear locked me in place. He stopped again, about a car's length away from me. Still smiling, still staring upward, when I finally managed to speak. What came out of my mouth wasn't what I intended. I wanted to sound angry, confident. I wanted to demand to know what he wanted. Instead, my voice cracked and came out weak and scared. What the fuh? I heard the fear in my own voice, and that made everything worse. But he didn't react. Not at all. He didn't look at me. He didn't change his expression. He just stood there. After what felt like an eternity, he slowly turned around, slowly, carefully, and then he started dance-walking away, just like before. I didn't turn my back on him. I watched him the entire time, my heart pounding, my muscles tight, ready to run if I had to. He moved farther and farther away until he was almost out of sight. That's when I realized something was wrong. He wasn't getting smaller anymore. He wasn't dancing. He was coming back. And this time, he was running. I ran too. I didn't look back until I reached a brighter, more populated road with passing cars and working streetlights. When I finally dared to glance behind me, he was gone. Completely gone. No sign of him anywhere. I made it home and locked the door behind me. I barely slept that night. I lived in that city for another 6 months. I never went on another night walk, not once. That man's face stayed with me. That smile, those eyes. He didn't look drunk. He didn't look high. He looked empty, broken, completely insane. And that is far more terrifying than anything else I have ever seen. About 3 years ago, my best friend and I experienced something that still keeps us awake at night. We talk about it constantly, trying to make sense of it, but nothing lines up anymore. What makes it worse is that we both remember it the same way. Not vaguely, not emotionally. We remember it in sharp, exact detail, like a shared recording in our minds. And yet the world now insists that it never happened that way at all. For context, we don't drink, we don't do drugs, and we weren't reckless teenagers looking for trouble. We are both 22 now, but this happened when we were 19. We went on a trip together to Greece, to a very rural coastal area, far away from big cities and tourist crowds. It was supposed to be calm, beautiful, and simple, and for the most part, it was. We stayed at a small hotel that felt completely isolated. There were no shops nearby, no busy streets, no nightlife. Just the sea, cliffs, dusty roads, and long stretches of silence broken only by insects and the wind. One day during that trip, we decided to hike along the coast to a restaurant that we'd heard about. It was on a cape, far from everything else, and the hotel staff told us it would take about 2 hours to walk there. That day is burned into my memory. My friend was dressed exactly the way she always dressed back then. She had on platform heels, which she wore everywhere without exception. She's very short and hated feeling small, so she wore platforms on beaches, in shops, on long walks, everywhere. That day she was wearing her platform heels, a long pink skirt, and a white top. I remember it clearly because I teased her about hiking in platforms, and she laughed and told me she'd be fine. I was wearing Birkenstocks and much more comfortable, but she never complained once. When we arrived at the restaurant, something immediately felt off. As soon as we walked inside, a group of men all turned their heads and looked straight at us. This wasn't unusual for us. We're both considered conventionally attractive, and throughout that trip we had gotten used to attention. Stares didn't normally bother us, but this time felt different. The men didn't just glance, they stared. There were only 2 other couples in the entire restaurant, and they were seated far away from us. The group of men kept whispering to each other, looking at us, then looking at their phones. Every time we shifted in our seats, and we could feel their eyes on us. It felt deliberate, focused, and uncomfortable. We tried to ignore it and enjoy our lunch, but neither of us could relax. We both remember talking quietly about it at the table, saying how strange it felt, saying we should probably leave as soon as we finished eating. When we stood up to leave, the men stood up too, immediately, no delay, no pretending to pay or gather things. They followed us outside. In front of the restaurant was an open area with parked cars and large rocks that led down into the sea. The coastline there was dramatic and beautiful, and despite everything, we decided to take a few photos on the rocks. I had been vlogging the entire trip, filming almost everything we did, so I kept my camera rolling. That's when things became undeniably wrong. The men began taking photos of us, not discreetly, not subtly. They lifted their phones openly and pointed them directly at us. They were also on calls, speaking to someone while filming or photographing us, gesturing in our direction. There was no one else around, no other tourists, no staff, just us, them, and the open sea. We felt exposed and scared. We talked quickly and quietly about what to do. We didn't want to call our parents and panic them from another country. We didn't have anyone nearby to ask for help. So we made the decision to leave and head back to the hotel immediately. As we started walking back along the coast, we noticed the men get into their car. They didn't drive away. Instead, they followed us, slowly, creeping along behind us as we walked on the rocks parallel to the road. I remember filming this part, too. I remember whispering into the camera. I remember my voice shaking. After about 7 minutes of walking, the rocky path ended. The coastline hit a solid wall where the land met the water. The road beside us continued forward into a thick, bushy area with no visibility and no houses. The men's car was still behind us. We both knew at the same moment that if we walked down that road into the bushes, something bad would happen. We didn't say the word kidnapped out loud, but it was there, heavy in the air between us. So we made a desperate decision. Instead of taking the road, we stepped into the sea. The tide was high. The water quickly reached over our knees. I remember how cold it was. I remember how awkward it felt to walk through the water while holding my camera. I remember laughing nervously and trying to keep the lens dry. I remember my friend's pink skirt darkening as it soaked up the water, and her platform heels struggling against the uneven seabed. We kept turning around to look behind us. The men had stopped their car. They got out and stood there, watching us walk through the water. They didn't shout. They didn't follow us into the sea. They just stood there and watched. Eventually, we reached the other side and climbed out of the water. We found a bench and sat there, breathing heavily, watching them watch us. After what felt like forever, they got back into their car and drove away. We waited a long time before moving again. We were shaken, but relieved. We talked about it constantly after that day, We talked about how close we felt to something terrible happening. We talked about it on the trip, after the trip, for years afterward. That's why what happened recently has completely broken us. A few weeks ago, I went looking through my old footage. I wanted to make a birthday edit for my friend, a montage of moments from our trip. I opened the videos from that day, expecting to relive everything the way I always had. But the footage was wrong. In the video of us taking photos by the sea, there were suddenly random women in bikinis right next to us, standing close, laughing, posing, women who were absolutely not there. We both would have remembered them. We would have talked to them. We would have mentioned them. But according to the footage, they had been there the whole time. Even worse was the footage of us walking through the water. It was time-stamped on a completely different day, and we were wearing completely different clothes, different outfits, different shoes. So no pink skirt, no platform heels. The water walk had somehow been separated from the restaurant day entirely. The men were nowhere to be seen. The car was gone. In the video, I never once mentioned being followed. I never panned the camera toward the road. It just looks like we randomly decided to walk through deep water for no reason at all. That makes no sense. We know we filmed those men. We know we talked about them while filming. We know we talked about it afterwards, specifically for the vlog. I have watched those videos many times over the last 2 years, and they were always exactly how we remembered them. This change is recent. I reset my phone multiple times. Nothing changed. I called a close friend who wasn't on the trip, but who we have told this story to countless times. I expected him to confirm at least hearing it before. Instead, he told me he had never heard it in his life. He sounded genuinely confused. He asked why we wouldn't have mentioned something so terrifying. My best friend and I both have the exact same memory. The water, the men, the car, the fear, the timing, everything. Now the physical evidence says it never happened that way. My friend thinks we might have experienced something like quantum immortality, that maybe, in another version of events, something did happen to us, and our consciousness moved into this version of reality where we survived. I don't know if I believe that. I don't want to. But I can't explain why our memories no longer match reality. What scares me most is that the world feels stable until it suddenly doesn't. If something this big can shift, what else doesn't line up anymore? What else might be wrong? Sometimes I wonder if we died that day, or maybe later, or maybe we're still alive, but not in the world we started in. All I know is that our memories exist in a place that no longer matches the facts. And once you notice that, it's impossible to stop wondering what else has quietly changed without you noticing. If you're still here, it means these stories didn't just pass through you. They stayed. Every file you heard tonight was shared by real people. Real fear, real uncertainty, real moments where something felt wrong, or almost did. And the most disturbing part, most of these stories don't end with answers. They end with silence, with questions, with the feeling that whatever was there might still be. If you want to keep exploring the cases that don't let go, subscribe to LURK, the Insomnia Files. There are many more files waiting, and not all of them close before it's too late.